eventually you're going to have to take your kids. Oh, no, don't record this story. Eventually you're going to have to take your kids to the outdoors and fish and stuff like that. And we went fishing in Strawberry Reservoir last week, and it was fantastic. It was way fun. My two boys went nuts. One caught 7, the other caught 5. I had no idea that there are salmon in the Strawberry Reservoir. Who knew? Salmon.
Crazy.
But the guy that we went with, he had a pontoon boat, and he gave us a couple fish to to cook up and do the thing with, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. Cleaning, gutting fish. I had no idea, man. I had to YouTube it. I had to look up instructions. Like, I didn't know you slice the thing open, stuck your fish down the throat, and pull it all out. Shane, this is gross, man. It's gross. They're slimy. It's gross.
Hey,
the whole time I get home.
I got your back, city boy.
I get
Somebody
home. I'm
needs
like,
to give that boy a deer.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
oh,
Have
no,
a field dress
hell no.
of deer.
Hell no. I didn't even know where to like clean this fish out. So I finally went over to like Mill Pond over in PG, and it was gross. Anyway, we fried it up. It was absolutely delicious. So it made me almost want to do it again. Almost want to do it again.
The evolution of Dan Dixon live on Contracts and Negotiations. You know what? Actually,
there you go.
This is like,
I got you, Matt.
Is like that. Remember a few years ago they did the 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, that whole thing where they could connect anybody within 6 steps to Kevin Bacon. Well, I think there's like a 6 degrees, probably even 3 degrees of separation to all things real estate. Dan, I can take your story and say that has a real estate implication. We're in a stressful business, and we've got to find avenues to get outside of the routine and sharpen the saw, as Stephen Covey would say, get better, realize that there's more. I mean, there's nothing wrong with us being highly focused, highly energized about our business, but you also got to have some other avenues to keep you sane and human. So thanks for sharing that, Dan.
Yeah.
All right.
You're welcome. It's
listen, I've got a full agenda this morning, and I'm just going to kind of give you the outline so you can see the roadmap of where we're going. One, I want to just talk about briefly some market information. I always like to give a little bit of that on these calls. Then I want to talk about, I put it on my notes here, the performative nature of our occupation versus just knowledge versus incompetency. So that's going to be a fun topic. And then to get down to brass tacks, all of that performative portion is really going to dovetail nicely with kind of a case study at the end and how that dovetails with some of the things that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis and make us either a good agent or a mediocre or a starving agent. So that's kind of the roadmap today. As is usual, I'll just tell you some of the housekeeping on this. This is a terribly informal call. So it's appropriate at any time. You can call, BS, raise your flag and be like, Barton, I don't know if I agree with you. It always turns into a great conversation, and it's totally acceptable. But certainly if you have an experience that you think is applicable and helpful for the group, feel free to chime in. Fair enough? And then the last thing, housekeeping wise, and listen, I always get the excuses. I say, it's kind of like good Zoom protocol. If it's at all possible for you, turn on your video and trust me, cue up all the excuses. Oh, I just went to the gym and my hair's a mess and my makeup's not on or whatever.
Matt, I feel attacked just then.
I was just heading everybody off with the most common excuse. I went to the gym. I would just say, well, go to the gym earlier. I don't know. There's an idea. Okay, let's get underway. So industry information, I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, listen, fair disclosure, Jenny, you're new on the call. Appreciate you being on here. I hope you come back because this really is, in my opinion, one of the most important meetings we can have as agents to stay relevant in our craft. I am a little bit of a nerd, a little bit. I highly believe that the conversations that we have are so much, they're relationship based for sure, and that's probably first and foremost. Having some knowledge about what we do is pretty important, high on the list. And I think being able to back it up with some data is probably pretty important. If I were to paint with a broad brush, that's kind of my recipe for real estate. Relationships first and foremost, care about people, be a good human being, know your craft, and then be able to back it up so that portion of people's brain, and it varies from your personality types. Some people need a little data, right? Your amiables, which my wife is, she needs a little bit of help with it, getting some facts and data to justify the position. But then you have your 11% of the population who are high analyticals and they want more. So all points in between, it's important for us as practitioners to have that component in our repertoire. Don't just punt on that. It's not that hard to have this information. So I'm going to share with you something. Let me pop this up on screen. Hopefully I've got this. All right. So there's a lot of discussion about, the Fed funds rate and where we're going and, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And it creates all this uncertainty and I don't know, almost for some people, despair. For other people, they look at this and like, well, we don't have control over this. We only get to understand how to navigate within the context of what's going on at the macro level, right? The geopolitical level. We don't control whether the United States bombs Iran. We don't control whether Russia invades Ukraine. We don't control whether Iran is going to mine the Strait of Hormuz and shut down 10% of the world's oil production, right? Those are all big things that we don't control, right? The Fed and what they do with the interest rate, or the Fed's fund rate, the rate they lend to big institutions, is out of our control. But we can, one, be knowledgeable about it, and two, hopefully decipher what it means without being a complete nerd and be able to help our clients understand what it means. Because I promise you, the vast majority of the population is literally throwing their hands up going, I don't know, there's so much information on this. I don't know how to make sense of this. I guess I'll accept all cookies. There we go. All right, so this is a nerd website. I'm just putting the disclosure out there. This is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. They have a great tool that does the probability of where the Fed funds rate is going. So I'm just going to orient you. There's not a test on this, but I think it's important for you to know what you're seeing on screen. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. Okay, so this is the basis points for the current rate. So the rate that the Fed lends other institutions is 4.25% to 4.45%. They do it in basis points. But the interesting thing here is on the left, these are all the dates of the upcoming Fed meetings. Okay, so we just had one, and Jerome Powell said, yep, we're going to keep rates the same. We're not moving them. Now, the market doesn't wait for the Fed to announce. They use things like this, the probability matrix, to figure out where are we going. And so if you look, the next meeting of the Fed is July 30th, right? Not too far off. And the important thing here is, what is the percentage? What is their?
I almost came back and then I was like, it's gonna be soft.
I'm gonna mute you, Shelly, because we didn't want to hear your private conversation. It's okay. So there's a 77% chance on the July 30th meeting that the Fed is going to keep rates at its current rate. There's not going to be any change. All right, so what's your reaction to that? Let's just stop there for a second. What's your reaction to that? Anybody, please. James, does that make you quake in your boots, make you nervous, make you want to get out of the industry? What? What's your reaction?
It doesn't make me nervous, but I think that's a little counter to what I would hope would happen. But yeah, it doesn't really make me nervous. It hasn't changed for a bit, and I don't get a vote in that, by the way.
None of us do. None of us are that big. Well, so here's an interesting, just a quick piece of commentary. You know what the market likes? The market likes stability. Think about your clients, both buyers and sellers. Let's focus for a second on buyers. right? If we had 6 months, a year of rates staying flat, what is the general buying public? What is the conclusion that they come to? No conclusion. They're just sheep. They're just sitting there waiting. Come on. It's Monday morning, I know, but you guys got to be, go ahead, Haley.
If they need a house, it's not going to do them any good to wait.
There you go.
Because rates are the same and they might as well buy today rather than wait for 3 months when they're thinking it's going to be way lower. So
it is what it is. I hate that saying sometimes, but sometimes it's actually true. It just is what it is. This is our reality. And once the general public figures out that there's stability, they're like, well, that is a fixed thing, at least for the foreseeable future. Therefore, I'm not going to use it as an excuse to wait, right, as a general rule. Okay?
Matt, I'll just tell you, I go back, 20, 25 years and rates were stable and rates weren't an issue. People made decisions based on their needs as opposed to trying to predict what rates were. And I've always longed for those days when people could make decisions based on their needs and desires as opposed to trying to predict where the rates are going.
Yeah. Okay, so that's I think you're getting at the point I want, James. When rates are fluctuating a lot, there's a lot of speculation and a lot of people hold on because they want to wait for some level of stability. Either, like a buyer, buyers again. Well, what if rates go down? I may lose some money, right? So I'm going to wait. So when we see the Fed holding rates, even though there's bigger issues, macro issues where we would want to see them come down, it's not necessarily bad for our industry. I'm going to segue here for a second. In our sales meetings last week, we're going to do one in St. George tomorrow. One of the points I show is I show several brokerages, pretty well-known names in the industry, and we're not trying to beat up on anybody. We love everybody. But, our volume and our sides are up in the neighborhood of 20% year over year. And that's not true of a lot of companies. There's others that are improving, but there's quite a few that are experiencing negative growth. And I think front and center with that is really more than anything, it's a mindset, right? When you have 300, 400, 500 agents and you see an organization going down, my first reaction is their leadership isn't doing them any favors. They're not helping them recognize reality, but then look for the opportunity in the reality. So let's quickly wrap up this because I don't want people to glaze over with me leaving a nerdy matrix on the screen and people go into convulsions. Here's the follow-on points. September, so a month and a half later, the Fed meets again. What is the probability that rates are going to drop a quarter point? I don't know. That looks pretty dang high. 98.87% chance that they're going to drop a quarter point. That's not a huge move, guys. It's still pretty stable, right? And the further you go out on these dates, the lower the probability, right? The further there's more things that can transpire over time. Therefore, the probability goes down. So, a month and a half after the September meeting, it's like, well, there's a 58% chance that we drop another quarter point. So that's about as far as I go. All of this stuff below, the 4th, 5th, 10th meeting, I really don't care because there's too much that's going to happen in the world to where this becomes relatively meaningless. But I always focus on these first 3 to see kind of where we're trending. So near term, within the next month and a half, we're going to stay the same. Within 3 months, we'll be down a quarter point. By the end of October, coming into Thanksgiving, we may be down. There's a decent probability. It's not great, but there's a decent probability that we'll be down a half a point. So I just wanted to show that to you so you can work into, your mentality when people ask us what I call the golden questions, right? Golden questions are it's a good time to sell, it's a good time to buy, or any version of that. And I want you to be equipped to, one, first express to them that you're hearing and you understand the concern. And if I were in your shoes, I'd be feeling the same way because there's so much information. But you know what? I and my brokerage actually spend time trying to digest and understand not only what this means on a national level, but what it means for us. And here's the best shot I can give you. And it is based on data. It's not me just testing the wind. We try and back it up with some intelligent data, right? And then I could just queue up those things, right? For the next 2-3 months, we're going to see rates largely be the same as they are. So I hope you all have this dialogue at the ready when you're dealing with buyers and sellers, for that matter. If you're dealing with a buyer, you should have some version of this dialogue. It's like, listen, here are the 2 things I can tell you. Rates really aren't going to change substantially over the next 3 months. So if you need to get into a house, if you want to get into a house over the next 3 months, the market is what the market is. The good news is we have the #1 lending brokerage in the state of Utah. We've got 60+ programs that we can see which one fits you best, and shop rates and get you the best we can within the context of the bigger market. But here's the follow-on point. Right now, and I want you guys to verify this as practitioners, are sellers willing to give concessions right now? As a general rule, they absolutely are, right? I get to see a lot of transactions come through as the principal broker because that's just part of my job. And I see lots of concessions, and some of them are rather significant. Are there price reductions currently? 100%. I showed you guys last time the graph of the median sales price over the last 7 years, and for the last 2 years, it literally, minus a few modest fluctuations, it is flatlined for 2 years. That means we've hit a barrier. The pricing isn't going to go up substantially, and therefore, and oh, by the way, at the same time, the amount of inventory has gone up 40% year over year. So that creates pressure for sellers to be more pliable. Is that a good message to be able to share with your buyers? Can that get them off the fence? So yeah, rates may be 7.5, somewhere in that range, but we realistically could get between $50,000 to $30,000 off between concessions and price reduction. What is that worth in the world of interest rates, right? When we know that people generally stay in their house about 7 years. I would say you have a better ROI on buying a house today when sellers are pliable, right? Versus waiting for the interest rates to come back 1/4 or 1/2 point. Am I misleading anybody by saying that? Or am I actually being a bearer of truth and telling them the true lay of the land? That's what you guys need to be. It's not because you have commission breath. It's not because we all want to get paid. We all need to get paid. But I hope you first and foremost come from a place of, I'm trying to do what's best for you as my client. I care about you. I care about your family. I care about your wealth building. And there's a real opportunity here, and it's counterintuitive, because if you listen to the noise, you're going to be told, well, yeah, it's a terrible time to buy. It's a terrible time to buy. Is it really going to ever get better? Is pricing going to come back 40%? For those of you that were in the business in 2007 and enjoyed the ride down to the trough of 2012, what percentage did pricing come back? This is a trivia question. You guys should know this. If you don't know it, make sure you write it down. How much did pricing come back in the Great Recession, the biggest economic, especially in real estate, correction in multiple generations? How much did we come back? It wasn't even 20%. Depends on where you were in the state, but it averaged somewhere around 15 to 18%. In the greatest recession that we have ever seen. And oh, by the way, after we hit the trough in 2012, it took about 2 years to recoup those gains. So in kind of a 4 or 5 year swing, we were back to normal. And what did we do after that? Oh, then we started a hockey stick. So if anybody is delusional, like I love it when the father-in-law of your buyer comes in and like, well, I remember back in the day, and you're up against a housing bubble. I'm sorry, I got to ask these questions. Do we have a housing bubble?
No.
Not even remotely close. Here's another little factoid. I'm sorry, I'm totally nerding out, and this wasn't on my agenda today. How much additional inventory was being produced in 2006, 2007, 5, 6, 7, than was needed by the population? What percentage more were we producing than was actually needed? Anybody know? It's about 30%. We were overbuilding by 30%. That's a housing bubble. What's our problem now? For the past 8 years, except for one quarter, we haven't even come remotely close to building the amount of housing that we need for our population. So we're the opposite of a housing bubble. And if you have an absence of housing, is price ever going to come back? Not for the foreseeable future. And this is where we really need to know these important components of our industry. If you're a pro, if you're in this business, rather than just, oh, I'll send you a rep sheet and, you know, we'll sign you up and we'll get, you're a consultant. You're like a Sherpa. You're trying to help people, guide them, navigate them. And how are you supposed to do that if you don't know some of these really important things about the housing industry, where we have been and where we currently are? So I applaud you for being on this call. I'll applaud you even more if you've taken up my challenge to once a week schedule an appointment for yourself to sharpen the saw and understand in greater depth what's going on in the industry. Okay,
Matt,
wow.
can I just tell a quick story?
Please do, because then
sold
I
a
can look
home
at my agenda and try and get myself back on track.
Okay, I'm only gonna take 20 seconds. I sold a house closed in Sugar House last week. When we listed the house, the seller, I've known him for a long time, helped him buy it 15 years ago. Told him the house, they were concerned that the market was bad and that they wouldn't be able to sell their house, and wanted to make sure that we're hoping to get at least 700. My point is that the guy's a CPA. He's very successful. He's not completely locked in a box, but he listens to the news, and he believed the market was bad. And I tried to get him to list it at 750. He came in at 730 because the market's so bad. We had 9 offers and sold it in a few days at 790. My point is, what you're saying is so important, because we're not just informing our clients, we have to counter the information they're getting from the news that is inaccurate, that might reflect a market in some markets, but not every market.
Yeah, James, you hit on such a key point. I'm going to take it one step further. I was lucky to get into the industry right after 9/11. Nobody picked up on the humor on that. I was lucky to get in right after 9/11. But that was shortly after our MLS went internet-based. And so the discussion was still lively at that time, going, oh my gosh, this is going to be the death of realtors, right? Everything's going to be available on the internet. There's going to be no need for us. In the late 90s, about 85 to 87% of the population used a realtor to do a real estate transaction. Anybody know what it's up to now? It's a little over 92%. Of all the transactions done go through a real estate agent and or brokerage. Isn't that ironic? More information than ever, and we're being used more than ever. So don't buy into the hype. Oh my gosh, AI is going to displace it. No, we're going to figure out how to utilize AI and continue to be the Sherpa. There was a guy, Ashley Woltuis, in our sales meeting, talked about, she was listening to this podcast a social media post, and this guy was like, I have cracked the code, and I was able to use AI to buy my own house. And it's like just these crazy little anecdotal stories that people latch onto to kind of fearmonger. The reality is it's still a see, touch, feel, relationship-based business. AI will help us gather information. Has anybody really played a lot with AI? Come on, raise your hand if you have. Okay. I've kind of run the spectrum, and I've asked all kinds of questions, from business questions to psychology questions to real estate questions. And it's kind of interesting. I'm going to give you my quick assessment. It starts off with a very generic set of data in most cases. It's almost like safe answers. It's like it gives you both sides of the coin. It's kind of its go-to, right? But once you start asking questions, it starts to be, for lack of a better term, more intelligent in its responses. And the only way you get it to be more intelligent is by asking intelligent questions. And so I think that's one of the openings for us as practitioners. We know how to ask more meaningful questions. I've challenged AI on some of the results it has brought up. and said, why are you saying that when such and such? And I will state something, and it'll come back and say, oh, that's a great point. Thank you for being, so serious in your inquiry. And you bring up a good point. So for instance, Anthony Fauci, one of the questions I was asking is, did he have a vested interest in, his position?
Careful.
I know. It just demonstrates the point, Dan. And the point I brought up was, now that he's been pardoned, and ChatGPT said, well, actually, he hasn't been pardoned yet. I'm like, contraire, mon frere, July 20th or January 20th, he was pardoned. And he's like, oh, good point. I'm glad that you're on top of your game. You're correct. And so my point is, AI is not all that yet. So just don't buy into it's going to displace us in our business. All right. So I do a lot of walking. Have for the last 7 months. I get about 40 miles in a week. My dog has never been so fit. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I try and round out my information. And I was doing my weekly check-in today with Jared James, kind of like him because he pulls in a lot of real estate data. And he actually had David Childers, who's the head of Keeping Current Matters. I don't know if anybody uses that as one of their data sources, but it's an intriguing conversation. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but it helped me come up with this title, their discussion back and forth. And they were talking about the performative nature of our business. Right? What do I mean when I say the performative nature of our business? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Man, you guys are boring this morning.
So if I had to guess, at some point we have to put on a little song and a dance, right, for our clients, whether it's to get a listing, during our listing presentation or during a buyer consult, is just, a little bit of a performative nature, a little bit of song and dance. That's what I call it. And yeah. Is that what you're getting at?
That is what I'm getting at. I mean, salesmanship. Now, listen, some people will hear the word salesmanship and they think of a snake oil salesman, right? Who's just doing something for his or her own interest. It's not what I'm talking about. The 3 notes I made was presentation, presence, and perception. Let me say that again. Presentation, presence, and perception. Those are the things that we do if we're performative in our job as a real estate professional. And I would just say, by the way, it's true in all aspects of our life. Trying to sell my wife on buying into marrying me, my kids to adopt certain core principles in their life of being good human beings. They're based on those principles. If I was just dry, and if I didn't know what I was talking about, I would have no credibility. If I was dry and just presented facts in a very factual way, they would tune out. And so there is a performance component to our business, right? We've got to be persuasive, and hopefully we're persuasive to do what's in the people's best interest, their self-interest, not necessarily ours, right? Both things can be true at the same time. It can be the best thing for them and be good for us as well. There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, that's the way it probably should be. So just a couple of quick notes on this. I actually have a lot of notes, but for sake of time, because I want to get to the case study, the practical application, here are just some things I wanted to reiterate on this. That performative side of our business is often overlooked. Have you run across those agents that just, they may even have some, well, first of all, have you run across the incompetent ones? Yep, there we go, head shaking. Have you run across the ones that may know what they're talking about, but they're just brutally tough to work with and communicate with? Yeah, and then there's the others that are skilled, they're pleasant, they still look out for their client's interest, but there's collaboration, and you're just like, dang, if I just do a deal with her every time or him every time, my life would be great. Hopefully people think that about you. All right, so performance side of our business really deals with how we present ourselves, how we communicate our value, and how we create emotional engagement. I would actually flip that, right? One of the things I've told agents for so many years is, especially when you're out working with a buyer, are people buying on emotion or logic first and foremost? Which one?
Well, they're buying on logic, but they are driven by emotion.
Okay, So I'm going to restate what you just said, Bill, because you're right. First and foremost, it's almost always emotional. Why can I say that so definitively? 11% of the population are high analyticals. And that's maybe the ones that start first with logic. Isn't it true that most of the time, all of us have shown houses, right? And I'm not trying to be sexist or anything here, but predominantly, who's the decision maker?
The wife,
Why?
because she feeds off emotion, and then the husband backs it with logic and data.
Wait, Shane, are you saying that the wife and women are not logical?
Not at all.
Not at all. I wanted to give you a chance to redeem yourself. But honestly, I think those decision makers, predominantly women, not always, but they're the ones that get it, right? I don't go out and typically buy a car because it's the most efficient. Listen, I don't care if you drive a Prius, good for you. I don't care. Save the environment. Ooh, I buy a truck. Why? Why do I buy a truck? It's utilitarian. I can haul stuff around, but there's an emotion to it, right? I didn't just buy a truck and use it. I put the stock tires on. I put a lift on it. I put 35s on it. You put different things on it. Be like, that's emotion, right? It's not a terribly exotic example, but houses are the same way. People envision of how they're going to feel in the house. Does it have a view? Is it close to the school so the kids can walk? Does it have a park nearby? Those are, some people could say that's logical, but I would argue that they're mostly emotional first, right? Because they're envisioning themselves and what their experience is going to be. And then they start running the numbers. Does it make sense? Is it priced well? Can I afford it? And so just remember that. That's how most of our transactions are done. You buy first on emotion and you backfill with logic. I think the vast majority of data backs that up, and it's important for us to understand that. Not that one is mutually exclusive of the other. They're both important, but get the sequencing right. Otherwise, you're going to be swimming upriver. Okay, so if we establish that emotion first and foremost drives the decision-making progress, how do you create emotion? How do you do it? Come on, you guys are the pros. I need ideas here.
I don't think you have to. You just follow their lead, and then
Okay.
you ask a lot of questions.
Oh, wait a minute. There's the start. You start asking them questions, right? I mean, I could queue up Mike Ferry as an example, or Jim Rohn, or a lot of different people who are influential. And this is a common theme. Ask questions. Why is that so important? Well, first of all, you start to find out what's important to them. And they will tend to share with you something, not fact-based, but kind of emotional-based. Oh, the last house we had, blah, 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 right? And it's either good or it's bad. And you start to cue in on that. And that kind of gives you your script of what you can reinforce in this house, not to be deceptive, but if there's a good connection, you want to harp on that, right? Okay. How else do we create emotion? Come on, Jan.
Well, are you talking about marketing or during the transaction?
Any component, right? Where you've got to persuade, how do you introduce some emotion? And maybe I'm not being straightforward enough in my question, so I'm just going to fast track it.
I was going to say, if I keep going, I'll help you out a little bit. For me, you kind of insert yourself into their life. So you start saying, hey, my kids do this. Your kids do this. When you're setting at home, you say, hey, you're in the kitchen. Will you put your stuff here? Will you put this here? Where will you put your kids' bedrooms in here? And where will you do this? And then I tell them halfway through, when the husband starts to panic, hey, she's buying off emotion. You and I are buying off numbers. I'll rein her in, and then we'll figure yours out.
So kind of what I'm hearing you say, Jen, is you're introducing some personal stories.
Correct.
Yeah. So there's a great book out there if you ever want a recommendation for something to listen to Audible or read. It's called Tell to Win. It's a fantastic book, and it demonstrates this whole point. For the entire history of humanity, history has been passed along by storytelling. it's kind of in our DNA. We can think in the abstract and concepts and stuff like that, and it makes a certain level of sense, but to make a true connection, quite often it requires some storytelling. How does your experience relate to mine? Can I relate to your? And so be good at sharing examples, storytelling, demonstrating the point, so that it gets their creative juices flowing and they can envision themselves in a similar story, right? This sounds so rudimentary, guys, but I'm telling you, I've asked so many agents over the years, nearly 20 years as a principal broker, what do you say? And guess what they're woefully deficient on? Storytelling. It's very antiseptic. Well, here's the reason why you do this and do that. And it's like robotic and it doesn't move the needle. The good agents, or even the great agents, there's this correlation between their success and their ability to be personal and to tell stories. That's not to be interpreted as making things up. Don't do that. That'll backfire on you, but use real stories from yourself or clients or other people you've worked with, and how, this certain house, a certain situation, a certain neighborhood has benefited, their life and made things better. It's storytelling, guys. Get good at it, right? It's actually kind of rewarding and fun if you do it and you do it well, but it's not a skill that we practice very well. And so it's kind of an action item for you. Do an assessment on how good you are. I mean, walk yourself through mentally. When I confront a certain situation, how do I handle it? Do I just go to, oh, here's what the contract says? That's an important part. You still need to know that, but it's probably not going to move the needle, right? If I can say, well, I have this client, the situation was this and blah, 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 and then eventually tie it back to something in the contract and how to position it or how to craft the offer. Okay, now you're merging the ideas together and moving the needle. Okay. All right. Last thing is I want to just do 3 reminders of what it is not. It's not fake. People have a barometer measures how much pressure is in the atmosphere, right? And people have a very good BS barometer, right? It's like highly attuned. They can pick up on disingenuous, fake, contrived. So your stories, and that's why I say don't make it up, make them real stories, because you can then project it with, authenticity, and people connect with that. But the opposite is true. If it's not authentic and it's contrived and made up, they're going to read it. I can promise you. They have a highly attuned BS barometer. It's not vanity. It's not sitting there, talking about how great you are and all of your wonderful experiences. It's got to be, tied to them and what's important for them. And oh, by the way, it's not mutually exclusive. It doesn't replace substance. It's to be used together, right? Super important. As I look back at over 20 years of doing the principal broker thing, I hope you just trust me on this. I've watched so many agents, and some of them are competent and they have a certain level of success, but the ones that tend to start to hockey stick their business are the ones that are not only competent and have a good basis of information, but they understand this exact thing that we're talking about this morning, and learning how to make the connection so there's a smooth delivery mechanism for their substance. They go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive of each other. Okay, so in the last 14 minutes we have here, I want to bring this down to something that a couple of things that are part of our day-to-day life. And I do this because they're front and center of so much of our business. I think it's worthwhile discussing how to navigate these things with what we just discussed. So agency is super important according to the DRE. It's super important to get paid, and it's super important because some of it has changed in the last 8-9 months. And so I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of agents, especially October, November, December, when the national settlement was relatively new. And then you find there's some new components that have come about in the 6, 8, 10 months after the settlement. And I think it's important for us to understand. So my first question is, how many of you are like, and I need to see hands if you're video's not showing, you can use your emoticon down at the bottom. How many of you are highly comfortable approaching a buyer about signing an EBBA? Okay, so that's about 2/3 of us. It's about 2/3. That's good. And why? That's the follow-on question. Why are you comfortable? This is going to get us down to brass tacks. So give me some feedback. Why are you comfortable? Bunny, I'm going to pick on you. Why are you comfortable telling an agent, hey, you know what? It's in your best interest to sign a buyer agency agreement. What's your approach?
Well, most of my buyers typically become friends and family, and I have no problem. It's about building the relationship with me. So I have no problem being upfront and honest and flexible when it comes to that. So I've never really had much of an issue. I'm not necessarily.
Wait, stop there.
Yeah.
Stop there. I'm sorry, this is my style. I'm going to interrupt you. Did everybody hear what she just said? It's super important because you have a high understanding of who you are and where you're coming from, and you come from a place of integrity. You're not swimming upriver. You know you're bringing value to them, and you're going to do what's in their best interest, and you're going to help them. That sounds so simple, but it is so fundamentally important as a starting point. You really have to not only believe it, but you have to act on it, that you're going to do what's in their best interest. Therefore, it's easy to say, you want to sign an agency agreement with me because I'm going to kick butt on your behalf, and I will always be looking out for your best interest. Is that fair to say that's part of your approach?
Absolutely.
Okay, continue.
No, you summed it up. It was just that.
Yeah. All right. So how do we, so there's the emotion side of it and the relationship side of it. Is there a structural side of it? Do we have to have agency before we work with a client now? Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah, go ahead, James.
Can I add something? I heard somebody, it's been several months ago, present a method of presenting this, and I really liked it, and I've used it since. And that is, at their first meeting, they sit down with 3 packages of contracts and go over with their clients that these are the contracts involved in a transaction. Here's the buyer broker, here's the listing, and here's the rep fee. And these are the contracts that are going to control this transaction. And presenting the listing agreement, even though it's not theirs, this is a listing agreement that a seller is going to have. This is a contract we're going to have, and this is the contract that we're going to fill out when we buy. I think that has made it, for me, I haven't had a huge problem asking people to sign, but that's made it even easier that it is so natural that these 3 contracts are going to be involved, and the second one is the one I have with you. And anyway, it made it really, really natural.
So let's take that a little bit and inject some steroids on it, James. And I want to make sure we keep this at the forefront. I think what Bunny articulated, the relationship, and I've got your back, and I'm personally vested in my craft, and I personally care about you, is the baseline. You've got to establish that. But I think a quick follow on, like you're saying, James, and it's not the only approach, but I think it's a good approach, is to be like, hey, and by the way, right? Oh, by the way, who says that? Come on, all of you in the real estate space who take some coaching, who's the, oh, by the way? Buffini. There you go, Buffini. And oh, by the way, right? It takes the edge off when you're introducing something. And oh, by the way, I just wanted to show you, here are some of the contracts involved in the transaction, which I've personally invested a lot of time. I go to a contracts and negotiation call twice a month to make sure I stay abreast of all of the changes, right? Is that legit? Is that okay to say? For sure. Do other agents say that? Probably not. And so here's the thing. I think if you start with Bunny's baseline, and hey, look at that, Bunny's baseline of basic bravo-ness. I was trying to stick with alliteration. I lost it. But if you literally had a stack, so you have the EBBA, you have the ERS, you have the REPC, you have seller's disclosures. What else do you have? A PR. What else do you have? Maybe a stack of possible addenda that are going to come into play in the transaction and negotiations. And oh, by the way, you're going to want to make sure you have a quality lender. Yeah, here's the purpose of the preliminary title report and being able to resolve issues. For instance, if there's a fence line or boundary line issue, or there's a lien on the property, all the things that people don't anticipate. And here's the storytelling. This is where the storytelling comes into place. Because I just nerded out for a minute. You don't want to stick on nerded out because most people aren't nerds. But it's okay to introduce a little nerd, but you got to follow it up with a story. So if Bunny was my buyer, Bunny, and why is this important to you? Listen, I've done this now for 24, 25 years. And in all of those years, I have had one transaction, one out of all of the hundreds of transactions, I've had one that didn't have a problem. Is that a good statement to make? What does that do to the buyer? Am I being like overly dramatic? Am I like trying to scare them straight? Or am I just introducing a dose of reality that every transaction is going to have a speed bump or a few? And it's important that you have a professional that knows how to navigate them so it doesn't derail the deal, right? By the way, my little story, still remember the lady's name, Victoria Rose. How do you forget that name? Victoria Rose. Walked in, went to our front desk gal and Georgia and said, I need an agent to help me. And Georgia called me. My office was in the back. She's like, Matt, there's somebody here that needs some real estate help. And I remember sitting at my desk going, totally disgruntled. And I walked up and Victoria Rose said, I already have my lender. I already have the house I'm going to buy. I need to be in 3 weeks. I just need somebody to write the paperwork. Fill it out. And it wasn't even 3 weeks. It was 17 days later, closed, and I got paid. It's the only time in my entire career that I had a slam dunk that didn't have one hiccup, and it literally landed on my lap. So it's a fun story to tell people, because the flip side of that coin is I can tell them, unfortunately, there's just some things we don't anticipate. And it's not because people are necessarily bad actors, but there's just stuff that happens to come up. And you need somebody that's going to help you navigate that to keep your deal on track. Otherwise, there's a decent probability that it falls apart and you don't get the house that you want. Is that a fair, accurate statement to tell a buyer? Yeah, I think it's fair and it's honest. So, when we talk about the national settlement with buyer broker agreement, unfortunately, I've heard agents really just focus on the national settlement dictates this. Does the public generally care about the national settlement? Honestly, do they care? What's in it for me? I don't care. That's your problem. That's your industry. I just want to buy a house. So make sure you don't make yourself the victim, and by extension, since they're going to be your client, they're a client of the victim. That's just not a good recipe. Always try and take something and spin the positive on it, right? It's like, you know what, I'm going to use Jenny Erb. I'm going to use you. Hey Jenny, you know what, I'm super excited about the opportunity to work with you, and I hope by the time we're done talking that you'll see that I'm going to bring value to you, and I promise you, I am going to be looking out for your interests, and any questions, concerns at any point, at any time in the process, I will drop what I'm doing to answer your questions. You're that important to me. You feel good so far, Jenny?
Yep.
Okay. Here's a few things I need to share with you. I'm going to show you, here's all the contracts, blah, blah, blah. Here's another thing that the public has heard a little bit about. It's not important for us to go, completely down a rabbit hole on this, but there wasn't a national settlement by the DOJ, not with our company, but with the entire real estate industry across the nation. But it's important for you, being a buyer or a seller, to understand some of the ramifications of that. Fair enough?
Sure.
Yeah. And so here's the part that impacts you. It's kind of crazy because this national settlement just actually reiterated what's already been part of the administrative code in Utah, which is if us as a brokerage or me as an agent represent you, you as the public are entitled to know what I'm going to do in your behalf. We call these things fiduciary responsibilities, legal responsibilities, and that's captured in a buyer agency agreement. And not only has Utah required this, but the national settlement reiterated that if any licensed professional is going to work with a buyer, they actually have to have some form of agency for some duration. Doesn't have to be long, can be a day if we wanted it to be, to have it in writing. Okay. How hard is that for Jenny to hear right now?
It's long.
It's long. it's long, and I could shorten that up. But the key things that I told you was, hey, yeah, it is required. It's nothing you did. It's nothing I did. It's actually required. And what is some of their fear? The one I hear the most out, I don't want to be signed up with somebody for 12 months or whatever. And right out of the gate, I said, we can make it as long as we want. So now Jenny doesn't have to argue with me about the duration. That one's off the table, right?
Right.
And so then I'm going to go, my style is to go with essentially the assumptive close. So I'm super excited to get going because I already have some ideas on some of the best builders out there and the incentives they have, and we can save you perhaps, you know, $10, $15, $20,000 on your purchase given the current market conditions. But to kick all that off, we need to agree on how we're going to work together and for how long. I didn't say, are we? I said, how long? Right?
Perfect.
And so it kind of heads them off at the pass of yes, no, I will or I will not sign an agency agreement. It's the assumptive close. I just assume we are. Therefore, we need to talk about the duration. These are like subtleties, guys, but they're and do they work for everybody? No, you're still going to have that 11% that I have a component of. I'm a split expressive and analytical. So I'm not in my ivory tower. I totally understand where analyticals are coming from. And if you said that to me, I might say, well, I didn't actually say that I wanted to sign an agency agreement. Remember, 11% of the population. That means 89% are probably going to be like, okay, how about we do it for a month or 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or whatever they're comfortable with. Are you okay with that? If somebody came to you, Jenny, and said, and you said that, well, how long do we want to work together? I don't know. Is a month okay? What would your response be?
Sure. That sounds terrible as an agent.
You're just happy to get a buyer. I think it's great to say, oh my gosh, that's super exciting. Anytime you can reinforce them so they don't feel like they have to fight you is a good strategy. But there's an opportunity to move it a little bit. Jenny, I'm so glad we're ready to work together. Can I just suggest something? It takes us usually a week to 4 weeks to find a house that's suitable and to put an offer in and get it accepted and then go through the contract period. Our company likes to see 3 to 4 months. I'm okay if we just do 2 months. Are you okay with that so that we have that covered during the time frame? Right? She doesn't know what she doesn't know, and I just helped her understand that it's going to be at least a 2-month process. And here's the crazy thing, what you need to remember with agency agreements. This has been shown in some unofficial studies that once somebody signs their name to you, and as long as you do a decent job, if you get to the end of a time frame and you've been working well for them, most people are just going to extend, right? Most. And so the trick is,
question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So generally what I say to somebody is I tell them, hey, I put about 6 months on here because it does take some time. It takes 30 days to just get through the contract. And at any time that you find, that we're not a good fit, then that timer thing threw me off.
Sorry.
I'll let anytime that we're just not a good fit, if you feel like we're not a good fit, then there's no reason why I should hold you to this contract. And I do something like that. So it makes them feel more comfortable.
So you take the edge off it, the seriousness of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The catastrophic nature of it. There's a lot of variations on that. And by the way, I couldn't see who that was. Who was saying
that? It's Jenny. Just Jenny Erb.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, you're sorry, your photo locked up on my screen, so I couldn't see you. Okay, so yeah, I like that, Jenny. I would just one note of caution until they ask. I don't know how readily I would volunteer that. Here's my point.
Okay.
Hey, listen, I want to make sure, here would be my spin on this, Jenny. Hey, I've been in business for whatever period of time, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. My relationships are so important to me. The last thing I want to do is not do the job for you. Will you promise me, see, I'm going to head you off at the pass. Will you promise me that if I'm not doing the job, you'll be honest with me and tell me where I can improve? And if I can't improve, we'll figure out a way to make our agreement go away.
Nice. I've never had anyone cancel, by the way. So
right, it's because probably because you take the edge off and they know it's there, so they don't have to demonstrate to you, and you're a pro. So anyway, we're out of time, so I'm just going to hit these last two for you to think through on your own. So that's the buyer broker agreement. The ERS, right? If you paid attention, the national settlement when it came out August, September, our UAR forms in section 2, which is the brokerage fee section, only had a 2.1 and a 2.2. Now there's 3 sections. I just want you to remember these. 2.1 is how much the listing brokerage is going to get paid if somebody sells the house. What is section 2.2? How much additional you're going to get paid if there's an unrepresented buyer, which we're seeing a little more, not a lot, but a little more frequency on, right? Are you going to do work when there's an unrepresented buyer? Hell yes, you are. You will continue to do work. And are you required to put them out there? No, we have some that come through. I call the agents, be like, hey, listen, no offense, but what are you thinking? And, you know, sometimes their rationale, well, I'm representing them on the buy side and blah, 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 and I don't want to gouge them. Okay, you know, as long as there's business calculus, right? What I don't want to see is just a knee jerk, like, oh, I'm afraid to put something there. If you present that well, right? I'm going to use Colleen, because Colleen's dutiful today. She's my seller. I'd be like, Colleen, I'm so excited to get your home sold. And, you know, it's such a spectacular home. And I have so many ideas of what we're going to do. And we're going to get you top dollar on this. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Get the emotion up. When it comes to section 2.2 of the ERS, I'm like, hey, it's really important that we have this defined in writing. And I'm going to tell you why it's so important. So Colleen, section 2.1 is when we sell your house. Notice I didn't say if. When we sell your house, this is how much you will, out of the proceeds, you will owe my company. Notice I didn't say me. Keep yourself from being the bad guy. It's not that the brokerage is a bad guy, but you need to maintain your relationship. This is how much you'll pay my brokerage. Okay. Section 2.2, and I'm going to queue up the whole discussion of the national settlement. I'll be like, some things changed last year. It's not like super important that you're extremely well versed, but I'll just say this: because of the national settlement from the DOJ on the entire industry across the nation, we do see more of the public, not a lot, but more of the public coming in and saying they don't want to have an agent as the buyer. Well, who's going to take care of them, right? Who's going to show them the contracts? Who's going to send them digital signatures? Who's going to answer some questions without being their agent? Who's going to do that? Well, there's an opportunity, if you're okay with it as the seller, that we can potentially avoid paying a buyer's agent if we have a good plan for dealing with unrepresented buyers. See how I queued that up? Their interest level is a little higher now. I'm going to save you money, right? And then I'm going to fall back and be like, the way our company does this is, rather than what you would typically pay a buyer's agent between 2.5%, 3%, whatever we choose, our company, and I'm just spitballing numbers here, this isn't like some definition I have that you must follow at RE/MAX Associates, but if we end up representing, or helping, I should say, helping an unrepresented buyer, we will do work for them while still only representing you, but helping to grease the skids and making a deal happen. And for that, the company charges an additional %. So rather than 3% to us and 3% to a buyer's agent, you're 3% to us and 1% for them represent buyer's agent. That's saving you 2% on a $500,000 house. That's saving you 10 grand, right? For most people, they're like, sweet, I can save 10 grand. Yes, please put that in there, right? And then the last one, I want you guys to go and read this so you understand it, because I'm finding so much misunderstanding on this. Section 2.3. 2.3 is a permission section. It's not a hard and fast requirement. First and foremost, there's 2 parts to it. It says How much is the seller authorizing you as their agent and us as a brokerage to talk to other brokerages and agents about what could be offered by way of a cooperative compensation? Nothing is solid until one of two things happen. In that section, it says if the brokerage signs a broker-to-broker compensation agreement within that limit, then the seller would be obligated to pay. What I tell agents is tell them we'll never sign a buyer-broker or a broker-to-broker compensation agreement without checking with you first. Now the edge has been taken off. So give me the permission to advertise 3%, 4%, right? We want to cast as wide a net as possible. And I will even put an addendum if you need to that before any broker-to-broker compensation agreement is signed, we will consult with the seller and get their permission. And you've just navigated section 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 to a degree that most agents won't. And it also demonstrates your understanding of contracts, that you have a contract in mind and they're going to feel really good because they know they've got an expert representing them. So that's what I wanted to cover today. I hope you guys will understand the performative nature of the business, that you'll embrace it, that you'll read good information like Tell to Win, be good at telling stories. That doesn't mean you have to like spin a yarn and tell this big protracted story, but learn how to weave in meaningful personal stories to help your clients understand and see your value. And if you do so, things like agency agreements that a lot of agents get weirded out over, like, oh my gosh, I just can't have somebody sign up, for 3 months or 6 months. It'll never change until you change your mindset about it and the value that you bring. So I appreciate you guys being on here. I hope you guys have a great week and I wish you much success. Okay, have a good one.
Go get them, team.